The Vietnam War, the unofficial conflict between the USA and the Soviet Union. Prologue. The war that was never official. The jungles of Vietnam still whisper with the echoes of a war that was never officially declared between the United States and the Soviet Union. A war fought not only with bullets and bombs, but with ideologies, experiments, and silent rivalries that shaped an entire generation. By 1964, the United States had entered Southeast Asia with one clear mission: to halt the spread of communism at any cost. After the fall of China to Mao's revolution, Washington believed the domino theory. If Vietnam fell, the rest of Asia would follow. But behind the speeches about freedom and democracy, there was something far colder: the machinery of profit and power. American corporations had already built thousands of planes, tanks, and experimental weapons during the Cold War buildup. Vietnam became the perfect testing ground, a laboratory for the newest technologies of destruction. The storm over the jungle. The war in Vietnam soon turned into one of the most brutal air campaigns in human history. The Americans called it Operation Rolling Thunder. From 1965 onward, the skies above Hanoi and Haiphong thundered with the sound of jet engines and explosions. Over 7.7 million tons of bombs fell on Vietnamese soil, more than the total dropped during World War II. Villages vanished in fire, rivers boiled. Forests, once dense and alive, turned to wastelands under waves of napalm and chemical rain. For the first time, the world witnessed the use of Agent Orange and other defoliants, poisons that stripped trees bare and poisoned generations. New weather manipulation programs were tested. American pilots seeded clouds to create artificial storms, drowning supply roads in endless mud. The United States called it precision warfare. To the Vietnamese, it was apocalypse from the sky. The call for help. As the American air raids grew more devastating, North Vietnam stood on the edge of collapse. Its anti-air defenses were minimal, radar and missile systems were nearly non-existent. The government in Hanoi turned to its ally, the Soviet Union. But in 1964, Nikita Khrushchev refused to get involved. He believed Vietnam would be another Korea, a costly and endless war. It wasn't until 1965, when Leonid Brezhnev took power, that Moscow made its move. Brezhnev sent one of his most trusted men, Alexei Kosygin, the Soviet Prime Minister, to Hanoi. Their meeting changed everything. Within weeks, a secret agreement was signed. The USSR would provide full-scale military and technical assistance to Vietnam.
The arrival of the Red Engineers. On April 16, 1965, the first Soviet train crossed China and entered Vietnam. On board, radar systems, missile launchers, fighter jets, and dozens of engineers, officers, and translators. They came not as conquerors, but as silent teachers, the shadow soldiers of a hidden war. Training centers were built deep in the jungle. Bamboo huts served as classrooms. In unbearable heat, surrounded by snakes and disease, Soviet instructors trained young Vietnamese recruits. Few of the students could read or write, but their determination was unbreakable. They learned how to assemble and operate the S-75 Dvina anti-air missile system, the same weapon that would soon terrify American pilots. They practiced calculating missile trajectories by candlelight. They memorized radar frequencies, aircraft silhouettes, and flight patterns. Communication was a struggle. Translators were scarce, but courage and solidarity replaced language.
The birth of Vietnam's Sky Defenders. By July 1965, Soviet-led air defense divisions were operating near Hanoi. Missile launchers were hidden beneath the jungle canopy, camouflaged with branches and mud. And then history changed. On July 24, 1965, Soviet-trained Vietnamese operators launched 4 missiles at incoming U.S. jets. 3 American aircraft were destroyed in seconds. It was the first successful missile strike in Vietnam's history. The jungle erupted in cheers. Soviet officers wept. Their students had done it. For the Americans, it was a message. The skies of Vietnam would no longer be safe.
The cost of friendship. Every day, Soviet ships unloaded crates of supplies in Haiphong Harbor. Missiles, engines, fuel, radar systems, and thousands of tons of food, medicine, and uniforms. By 1967, the USSR covered over 60% of Vietnam's military needs and 40% of its economic aid. But the cost was immense. Unofficially, Moscow spent 1.5 to 2 million rubles per day on the war effort. Hundreds of Soviet specialists lived and died in silence, their names hidden in classified reports. They weren't supposed to exist. Officially, the USSR had no troops in Vietnam, yet their work turned the tide of the war.
The hidden war within the war. Beyond the battlefield, the Vietnam conflict became a stage for espionage, technology races, and psychological warfare. American pilots returned from missions terrified of Soviet-made missiles they couldn't see. Soviet advisors analyzed captured American equipment, improving their own radar and jet designs. It was a shadow war, a chess game played under tropical rain. Each move, each countermeasure, shaped the future of Cold War strategy. Meanwhile, propaganda machines on both sides painted the war as a moral crusade. In truth, it was a struggle of pride. Two superpowers testing their limits on foreign soil, while the Vietnamese paid the price.
The human face of the war. For the soldiers, the technicians, and the farmers who lived beneath the bombings, ideology meant little. They wanted to survive. Villagers carried anti-aircraft shells on their backs through flooded rice fields. Children learned to hide at the sound of approaching jets. Entire families disappeared into underground tunnels that stretched for miles. Soviet officers often shared their rations with locals, fixing radios, helping build shelters, and teaching basic medicine. Many left Vietnam forever changed, haunted by what they saw, proud of what they achieved, and unsure what it had all meant.
The silent end. By late 1974, the Soviet mission in Vietnam quietly came to an end. The war had drained both sides. The Americans withdrew in humiliation. Saigon would soon fall. In Moscow, there were no parades for the engineers and missile officers who had served in the jungle. Their medals were stored in drawers. Their names remained in sealed folders. They had fought a war that didn't officially exist. But history remembers, even if the records do not. Because the Vietnam War wasn't just a battle between nations. It was the moment when the world saw how far empires would go to prove their strength, and how deeply ordinary people would suffer for it.